So, when you are giving advice to any actor playing a role, here are some acting techniques for you to think about mentioning. Let's start with voice. So, voice. You need a word bank for describing people's voices. Maybe they are quite raspy. Maybe they have feeble voices, really gentle and weak. Maybe they have thundering, booming, bombastic voices that they use to dominate and threaten. Perhaps their voice is very gentle and soothing. So I want you to think about all the ways in which you can describe the voice. Perhaps it is haughty, clipped, cold. I'm thinking of Estella here. Estella with her lovely basilisk stare. Miss Havisham's voice would be rather raspy. Choked, I think. She would find it difficult to get the words out, and it would be very raspy indeed. Everything about her is ethereal and ghostly, and she turns to ashes in the stage adaptation, we know, through lighting and that wonderful scene where she seems to combust. Anyway, so yes, think about the words you would use to describe the voice. Pip, we've talked before about his stutter. Maybe his voice is feeble. I think Mrs. Joe's, her voice would be very caustic, acidic, shrill, on edge. Nothing gentle, nothing mellow or soft about that voice, but shrill. It would set you on edge. Even when she's on stage with Mr. Pumblechook and they have a good relationship and we see this different side to her, I think she would still, her voice would cut through the atmosphere like a knife, if you like. It would set you on edge. She is a very rigid, harsh person. Her voice would almost be like that anvil hammer-like blow that we hear anyway through Mr. Joe hammering away. So he's married to his work and he's married to a woman who sounds like the hammering of the anvil in the workshop, the poor man. Mr. Joe, he's one of the genuine, warm, human characters that we have. And his voice would be gentle, timid, soothing, playful. He would have he wouldn't, I would say, he would be very softly spoken, and chooses his words wisely, as we've seen in the script. And there is this sense of intimacy and, I was going to say confessional, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Not confidence, but when you take somebody into your confidence. I'll think of the words and I'll upload it next time when I'm talking about Mr. Joe, but you've got my revision notes on Mr. Joe. Anyway, so voice. Voice is very important. So those are words to describe the sound of the voice, but also don't forget the importance of pause. It's important, the pace is very important. So what's just as important in the delivery is what you don't say as much as what you do say. The pause. Think of a musical composition. Think of the space between the notes. They're also important. That's the same with the delivery of your lines. So you might describe the way that Estella delivers her lines. She's very controlled. I think she would pause for almost an uncomfortably long period of time and stare at Pip. So there's also pace. The use of pausing and silence for effect. Think about the type of accent that they have. We know Joe Gargery is a simple, humble character. His accent is very soft. We might say it has, talking of vocals, a very West Country-esque burr, B-U-R-R. Now that's the soft sound of the country accent, which is actually a word used to describe the Bristolian accent, which is where I'm from. which sometimes slips out. Joe is from that area. He's been described as being from that area in some publications. So he's got this gentle burr, B-U-R-R accent. Obviously, Pip changes and becomes a gentleman, so his accent would become more standard English and more refined, and perhaps you would hear this in the play, and that would juxtapose and contrast with the younger Pip, who might sound a bit more like Mr. Joe. Fluency. How fluent is your character? So perhaps the more well-educated characters are more fluent. The irony of not being fluent then. Yes. Perhaps Pip is stammering at first and unconfident when he goes to Mrs. Havisham's house. He's not very fluent. Emphasis. Which words do they emphasize? We can think here about Estella's delivery of the words, I'm not going in, boy. And there would definitely be emphasis on the word boy as she's asserting her superiority over Pip. Oh. Squidge, what is it? Silence. Dramatic pause. I might have to go in a moment. I think I have a cat issue to deal with. Now, clarity of their speech. I think that Stella has the most crystal clear vocals. I've said this in the revision notes. Because everything about her name and the fact that she's been given a jewel, she's a Stella, she's a star, she's cold, she's cut from crystal, she's rigid, she is this sharp, unhuman, almost beautiful object that Miss Havisham's created, and I think her accent would be very clear, crystal clear, to emphasise that as well. She'd be very clear. Miss Havisham is very raspy, like old ashen paper, and Mr. Pumblechook, he's so arrogant and full of himself, like he's full of stuffing, and he would sound like that too. I think he would sound very drunk and very blah, blah, blah. We've gone through his accent before. I know 1010 when we had that Wednesday lesson, and it's in the notes, Sarah, in the description of Pumblechook and Mrs. Joe. Yeah. What else do I want to say about vocals? I think that's about it for now. Yes.